Hello and welcome to the Max MPS Radio. My name is Jan Frisse, and today I'm joined by AJ Morris, who I followed for quite some time, and I'm actually looking forward to our discussion. We will mostly probably talk about attributes and mindsets in natural bodybuilding, especially contest prep. And I'm definitely looking forward to our discussion. Thanks for taking the time out of your day, AJ, and welcoming you to the podcast.
It's a pleasure, Jan. Thanks very much for having me on. And it's a pleasure to be on a podcast of this caliber. You've had some fantastic guests so far, doing really well for yourself in terms of getting attraction to the podcast, lots of views. So I expect to get some really good views on this one, and hopefully get some new followers my way as well, which would be fantastic. Obviously, getting some slightly we approach slightly different audiences, obviously being in different countries as well. So I always appreciate these opportunities, and very thankful for you having me on, mate. Really appreciate it.
Cool. No worries. Just before we actually start on today's topics, can you just quickly introduce yourself? Since I think probably quite some people from my audience will actually know you and know what you're doing, but for those that actually don't know you.
Sure. So I am 22 years old. I'm just about to turn 23 in April, and I am a full-time online coach. So I work as basically just a coach that primarily coaches physique athletes to the stage. I have a few general population clients that are on my roster that are from previous sign-ups, but majoritively I'm working with people that are either in their off seasons or in their contest prep phases, and that's what I do for day to day. It's what I absolutely love and enjoy. It's my passion. I've been doing that since 2015. My first ever contest was when I was 18, 17 years old. During that year, 2014, I competed that year as a teenager. I basically just came third and qualified for some British finals and didn't end up placing at them. So I had a sort of a relatively quiet level of experience within that year. Competed again in 2015, again as a teenager. I won a show that year, and I placed at British finals. I won a couple of teenage shows. So I gathered some momentum in 2015, and that was really what sort of sparked my love for competing and also my love for coaching. I coached my first prep client to the stage within that year, who did a lot of similar shows to me, and it just made me realize that was exactly what I wanted to do. And so from 2015 onwards, I've been coaching. I took 2016 as an off season because I knew that I was going to move up from teenagers to juniors, so that gap was fairly significant, of which we'll talk about a little bit when it comes to knowing what I needed to win in that category. We'll talk about that later in the podcast. But in 2017, I had a very successful year, so I won pretty much everything I did in that year. I only came second once, and that was at a British final. I got beaten at the WNBF British finals by a guy named Taf Fameji, who is probably going to be one of the best naturals, in my opinion, that's going to come up through the ranks over the coming years. Just very, very, very blessed from a genetic standpoint, with also a very, very good work ethic. And when you combine those two, it's very difficult to beat. So I came up against him, but the rest of the year I managed to, win all of my shows, win all my qualifiers, win a British final, win a world championship as a junior, and that for me was, ultimately pretty much the best level of success that I could have had within that year, bar one show. So I was very happy with that. That sort of, to me, proved what I wanted to do from a natural bodybuilding standpoint in terms of investing another couple of years into growth before I'm going to come back and compete in an open category. And the goal with that will be to achieve my WNBF pro status. And throughout this process, it's all about not only just building my physique, but also building my business and making sure that I stamp my mark from a perspective of being a highly respected contest prep coach. That's what I want. In the future, I want to be someone that people go to because they want to get ready for the top tier shows. I'd love to be coaching people to compete at the pro level and like coaching pro athletes. People that motivated me are very much like Cliff Wilson, Team 3 at MJ, etc. I love what they do and what their ethos is and how many people they get to coach. I think that's the kind of stuff that I want to be doing in the future. And then besides that, I'm obviously a content producer like Jan, so I do my own podcast and I have a members site, which is sort of private video content based site, and I invest a lot of time into my Instagram as well. So pretty busy, lots of stuff on my plate, and looking forward to getting more stuff on my plate in the future. And yeah, that's a pretty short wrap up as to who I am and where I've come from, and I hope that makes sense.
Absolutely, brilliant introduction, and I can relate to some of the stuff definitely as well. And I think from my perspective, took quite some inspiration from you, not just in both like competing or competition and business as well. Because you're obviously definitely doing pretty well in your business as well, especially at your age. I mean, you're even like a year younger than me, and people already like always tell me that I'm still pretty young. So definitely huge in that.
Thanks, dude. Appreciate it.
Starting with our today's topic, which will be attributes and mindset in natural bodybuilding, especially contest prep bodybuilding. And I will start this today with a question regarding a starting point of a contest prep, and it will be: which variables and life circumstances should someone already have in place before starting a contest prep, and how do you determine if somebody is ready?
Sure. So I think there's a lot of things we need to consider here when it comes to starting contest prep. And I think a lot of people need to realize that contest prep, if you want to do well, it's a very, very serious goal. And that for the cosmetic look, that's not the primary reason we want to compete. So if your goal is within achieving basically a purely cosmetic based goal, like, you know, your end goal is to look better, choosing a contest prep to do that is not the best option. You know, you should pick maybe doing like a photo shoot, or, you know, just dieting down and taking some cool photos, because a contest prep and what you need to really achieve is of a far higher caliber than just a generic diet for a cosmetic based look. And if anything, you know, pushing your body to the limit that we need at the end of the contest prep requires you to have a much more firm affirmation of a goal that's really within like winning a show, as opposed to just purely cosmetic, because you won't want to push yourself to the level that you have to when your goal is to just look better. If your goal is to win a show and beat people, then you'll probably start pushing yourself to the level that you need to push yourself to get in condition. So that's, I think, you know, a firm priority is: where are your goals at? You know, are you considering the importance of the contest prep goal at hand? And in terms of other factors that we need to consider, so what we're gonna realize is that contest prep in itself is a stress. So it's, you know, dieting down in general is a stress. The more aggressive and the length and the nature of the diet is obviously going to determine the stress that we're going to accumulate. We're going to accumulate a lot of stress from contest prep. Now, if we've got already plenty of existing stresses within our lives, whether it's external, whether it's internal stresses, whether it's issues with health, whether it's issues with friends, family, work, relationships, we've got to determine as to whether they're going to provide an impact or a large impact on our ability to lose fat efficiently. So if we have, you know, for example, a very stressful life, we have a job, a new role in a new business where the pressure is going to be extremely high. We're going to see maybe a disruption in sleep. We're going to see disruption in day-to-day habits. We're going to see issues with getting in training sessions, cardio sessions. We're going to have havoc at play when it comes to, you know, achieving consistent or, you know, perhaps more linear week-to-week progress. And I think that you can still get through a contest prep if you have something more stressful going on. Ultimately, life is not life without some level of stress, but we have to try and bring down as many of the controllable stresses as possible. So bringing down, you know, the life stresses, bringing down the work stresses as much as we possibly can to get ourselves in a position so we can attack prep is going to be key. Ultimately, like, the best scenario ever would be we have someone that has disposable income and doesn't do anything and literally just sits at home and bodybuilds, and we have basically, like, you know, the Jay Cutler of back in the day, you know, where when Jay would just, you know, eat, sleep, and train. If we had that, we'd have basically the best situation to maybe start contest prep. And if we can get as close to that within our own capacity, that's going to sort of level us up from an ability to make clean and clear progress. So that's that. Then we have our ammunition. So I like to kind of think of contest prep as like, you know, a battle where we're trying to win this battle. We're trying to get on stage with as much muscle as possible retained and as best as possible health at the end too. Okay, now ultimately getting into contest shape with health markers kept completely in check is probably going to be an unfeasible task. Most males will at some point be hypergonadal in terms of testosterone levels and will come out of prep with basically the goal of getting back into physiological ranges. We've been showing this plenty of times within studies, within people's own case studies, in terms of just taking blood work. So we know that that's a health marker that we can't potentially maintain as a natural. We know that for females, natural or assisted, we're going to probably see some issues with maintaining their regular menstrual cycle, and that's something that is a primary goal to get back when we've done competing, and if we can hold on to it for as long as possible, that's a goal too. So that brings us on to where our start point should be for all of these things to be kept in as best possible situation. So for males and females, I like to see them a decent amount above their previous stage weight and have been there for a period of time, you know, a decent period of time in their off season and done some productive work there. I think not enough people spend enough time at that set body fat or at that settling point because they're too afraid to stay there. They don't like how they look cosmetically at that body weight, or they think that they're going to make more productive progress by staying several pounds leaner, which is usually not the case. Usually they've got to stay at, you know, or hover, or at least go up and go down within a specific range that's actually fairly healthy. If we're going to mini cut and pull down, we're probably going to pull down to still a point where we're maintaining health markers and then push up again. So I think that's a very important fact to consider. So I think let's give some examples here. So if you're a female, I tend to like to see females hover anywhere between 15 and 20 pounds above their previous stage weight. This is very generic, but I think that's a good marker. It obviously depends how heavy you are on stage. But let's take, you know, maybe you're like 120 on stage, the female, bikini figure, something like that. I'd like to see you 140, 145 in your off season, something like that. Just hovering there, obviously doing mini cuts to maybe 10, 15 pounds above stage weight, pushing back up, but not doing mini cuts to like 5 pounds above stage weight and then coming back up, because 5 pounds above stage weight is fairly close, especially if you got truly lean, and you're just going to end up spinning your wheels and spending more time with, you know, the physiological issues and the metabolic adaptations that are going to occur whilst you're just pulling your body weight back down again and again. So getting to that set point, staying there for as long as you can whilst making productive progress. And also, so for males as well, an example, I think males can go pretty significantly above their previous stage weight. It's based on age, but I seem to think that if you're a younger male, you can probably see, if you got into true contest condition, you could probably see yourself go as much as 40 to 45 pounds above your previous stage weight, as long as condition is maintained and as long as you have a plan for your next prep. If you're doing a year off season, then you can probably afford to do that, as long as you do some sort of diet before the diet to get yourself in shooting range for your next prep. So I'm not saying I think starting your prep at 40 pounds above your previous stage weight is a bad idea, because losing 40 pounds in one go, I've done it, and trust me, it's not that fun, because your ability to fit in phases of diet management or diet fatigue management is low. Like, did I have really many diet breaks in a 45-week prep when I lost 40 pounds? Not really. So you're going to have to be really, really cautious with how you periodize your contest prep and how you periodize your off season to get good start points. So let's say we're hovering at these amounts, you know, 40 pounds for maybe a male, 15 to 20 for a female, very, very generic here. And then we should be on good calories at that point. So our ammunition from a, you know, body fat levels, so physiological things are going on, they're all good. Our ammunition is there from a caloric standpoint because our calories are nice and high. That means that when we start getting lean, we've got plenty to pull from. We're not just pulling from a very small amount of calories that, then we end up on very, very low food. And, whilst we can continue to diet, being on low food, like very low food, just sucks psychologically, because that's where people are going to back out, because they're going to look at their food, they're going to compare it to the next guy or the next girl, and they're going to think, fuck, I've ruined my metabolism or something like that, which ultimately some adaptations have occurred there, and they will have to be sort of sought after to get back into in a good spot post-show. So you will have some degree of adaptations. You won't have damage, you'll have adaptations. But the main thing with the low calories is that you're just basically not having much to pull from anymore, and your opportunities to make more fat loss progress are slim. So that's the reason why we want calories high. So you've got plenty to pull from. Cardio at that point, again, I've got mixed opinions on cardio in the off season. I like to keep some in if people are seeing huge detriments to their general fitness in an off season phase. If they're seeing an issue with higher repetition work and they're really having poor recovery intra-session, and they're out of breath a lot of the time, and they're at heavier body weight for them, sometimes I do like to add in some CV work, provided it doesn't affect energy balance. So sometimes, so provided they can get in their food, basically. So sometimes I'll have some in, but it will be very minimal. It'll be like maybe 25, 30 minutes on a rest day, something like that. I don't want people starting prep on a lot of cardio, because we will have the same issue. Well, also, and you know this as well, when we start introducing cardio, our adaptations there are actually fairly significant. So the amount of calories that we burn at the start of prep when we introduce cardio and our fitness is low, it's going to be higher than when our fitness is higher. We do the same 20 minutes at the same intensity. Hence why you want you to use cardio as a tool, and you don't want to be doing lots in your off season, because from a fitness perspective, we don't actually want to be too adaptive to cardio, because as a tool, it won't be as effective when we add it in. Because you want to kind of be like a little bit unfit when we add in cardio for it to have the response that we want in terms of caloric burn. You want to be super unfit, but you want to be a little bit unfit, so we add it in, it actually has a good effect on our energy balance. But what I have found is that when you do add CV in, the adaptations for most people are fairly fast. So people will see huge increases in fitness over a course of maybe like a 2 to 3 week period. So that shows that in most people, the adaptations that occur are fairly quick, and you do have to be quite stringent with the intensity or the heart rate parameters that we're putting on cardio to make sure that people aren't just getting fitter and doing hours and hours and hours on the cardio machines to achieve a deficit. And this is where I actually this is going on some more so prep setup, but this is where I actually like to, I'm sure you're the same, I actually like to pull food more frequently than I'm increasing cardio, because we know that with pulling food, we are pulling calories. We're just definitely pulling calories. Whereas with cardio and the adaptations that occur, we don't know exactly how many calories we're burning with that cardio. And we could see it go up massively, and that can become such a huge inconvenience in terms of the interference effect on training and therefore retaining muscle. So that's where I'm at with cardio. Other sort of situations is that injuries. So a lot of people go into prep with niggles. We call them niggles here. I'm not sure if you use the word niggles over there, but we call them like little niggles, which are like, things that maybe are going to turn into an injury. So if we have those, it's important that we're managing them. If we have a larger injury that's really interrupting training, so for example, someone had, I don't know, an impingement, for example, that's stopping them from doing any lower body movements with a large range of motion, we're going to really struggle to maintain maximal lower body tissue if we can't do movements with a large range of motion and take that muscle to where we need to take it to basically hold on to the muscle there, do what we were doing before we got hurt. So that would really be a case where I'd be like, okay, is it really a great idea that we prep now? The stage will always be there. Surely we should prep when we've got the maximum ability to retain muscle. And that's something that I think isn't happening too frequently, because luckily I've not got too many people with large injuries. And if they do have large injuries, they are working with therapists and professionals to work around those issues, and we're not dieting, because you wouldn't even run a mini cut ideally if you got a large injury, so let alone running a contest prep you're going to come into even more issues. So yeah, injuries, talked about calories, talked about start point. I think that's pretty much most of the things that I would cover with someone. Other things to sort of consider is like, and this is kind of like a start point thing, but it's more so related to sort of the initial setup. It's like, when have you started considering contest prep, and have you really given yourself enough time? Because, and this is reiterated in a lot of podcasts, so people probably know already, but to give my standpoint, I always give people more time, way more time than I think they need, because I'd rather have more time to either option one, reverse diet this individual into the show, or option two, give them frequent diet breaks to remove the stresses of dieting and allow for more progress. Now, you've got to have a firm balance here. You can't prep for a crazy amount of time, because ultimately you can only reverse for so long before you start to look way worse and just start to fade significantly. Valentin's actually experienced this, where he was reversing at the end of his prep, and from an adherence standpoint, it's very hard to do that, and his look was fading and he was looking worse towards the end because of how long he'd spent in a deficit. So just consider that you can't prep for years getting ready for a show in 2021. So I like to make sure I give people more than enough time, and be very honest with them at the start as to how much they've potentially got to lose, and what it's going to take to really get there. Obviously, we'll go on to a little bit more with some of your questions as well. So I think I'll save some of the mindset based things for when you ask about sort of what it took for me to win, etc. But I think that's just sort of hopefully everything covered that I would think about when it comes to starting a prep, and hopefully that made sense to people.
Yeah, absolutely. Great summary. And I mean, I usually make little notes for every question for myself in case I want to speak about something specifically more. And you pretty much covered everything that I have on here as well. So we are both pretty fortunate to work as online coaches full time in terms of a prep setting. And we pretty much can just spare our time how we want to. And I remember in some podcasts you talked about pulling a little bit away from having a huge client roster, and for your next prep, since you just want to balance more your work and prep, and have that in more favor of the prep, I guess. And in terms of timing the prep, time is probably huge. I mean, if you're in a shape where you're if you're 15 to 20 pounds or something above stage weight, and you have enough time, that's pretty good. I can just speak for myself. I was never in stage shape, so that's just my estimated weight, what I and what also Valentin thinks I will rate in, and what I will weigh at my stage conditioning. So I'm pretty much 30 pounds above or something, and I gave myself 8.5 months of time. So and I'm obviously doing the diet before the diet, so I'm currently doing a little bit more aggressive for 8 weeks in total, then do a 3 to 4 weeks of maintenance, and then do the later not half, but nearly 6 months of prepping towards the stage. And at that point I'm probably above 15 pounds or something above stage weight. So
Yeah, no, I think that's perfect. I think what people need to realize is that your propensity to lose tissue is much greater at the end. So if you're having to rush, which I've actually done before, I've actually rushed towards the end, realizing that I was losing at that perfect rate of loss at the start, being the slow and steady guy at the start, and then having to be the rushed guy at the end. towards my first qualifier. Bad plan, because lots of things go wrong when you try to lose fast and you're already very lean. You're gonna sacrifice a lot of gym performance very quick. I can remember my squatting went from feeling amazing to feeling absolutely horrendous in the space of one microcycle, and that's not good for retention of anything. And psychologically, it destroys you as well, because you know you're rushing, and that promotes just a general aura of stress. And like I said at the start, trying to get you in a position where your stresses are as low as possible is key. So actually, if you're ready a bit early, and you're never going to feel like this year, Jan, you're never going to feel like you're super ready. Even when people say that you're ready, you'll still think that you can probably get off more. And this is just the contest prepper's mindset. You'll always think that there's 2 or 3 pounds more. The thing that you've got to balance, and I think is important for junior athletes to hear, is that you've got to balance your current level of muscularity with what condition you can bring for that level of muscularity. Because the issue is, if you chase what Brian Whittaker has on stage, you haven't got the density of Brian Whittaker, and not many people have, and not many juniors have got density. And from, the years of training that you've got in the books before you've decided to do your first prep, you will have a good degree of density, but it's about balancing that act between chasing down condition, but not looking so much so that you've chased purely condition and lost so much muscular fullness that actually you'll look probably flatter and softer than you did maybe 4 pounds ago. And that's something that I've made the mistake of with some juniors before as well. I've pushed them so hard to try and get super condition, and they actually looked better 5 pounds ago. And, I think that's something that I did towards the end of my prep as well. I chased condition very, very hard and lost a degree of density that I had 2 or 3 pounds ago. And I had very similar condition, so it's a balancing act between the two. Something that's more important in younger athletes when the density is just lower. You can't chase, unfortunately, Brian Whittaker conditioning just yet. It's got to be relative to the individual. But yeah, that's my thoughts.
So you think in your case it didn't work out as well?
I thought I looked worse at the WNBF Worlds than I did 7 weeks prior at the BNBF Finals. So, and I've got pictures to kind of definitely put that in stone that I looked worse. So I was actually reversing that point, but my expenditure was still very high. And that was the issue. The expenditure and the stress produced by that expenditure, and the stress produced by still being in a very, very high volume phase of training, probably caused tissue loss. And whether I like it or not, my logbook numbers at that point were going down, and I was trying to sort of ignore it by trying to reciprocate that with an increased volume bolus. So I would stay in similar, volume amounts, given that my weights were coming down. And that was probably the wrong decision. At that point, given I was in contest condition, I should have probably maintained relative intensity and just basically accepted that my loads were going to maybe reduce a little bit, but not replaced it with a ton of work instead of, basically just doing my normal sessions. I was trying to replace work, which I don't think is a good idea, because your recovery capacity at that stage is so low, and you're just going to, the more you add, or the more that you try and reciprocate volume, the more that you're going to affect that next session. That microcycle is going to slowly become a poorer and poorer week for you. So that was my mistake there. But I also think that, like I said, like Valentin at the end of his show prep, you can only be in stage condition for so long. Your body, there is such a thing when you're in true contest condition as peaking too early. If you peak very early and you're at your best, you can't expect to be at your best 2 months down the line again. I hate it when people say, oh, I peaked too early, and they were soft as shit and they never got into show condition. No, you didn't peak too early. You never peaked. You never got into stage condition. But if you get into stage condition, you can absolutely peak too early, because you can be there and hover there for too long. And that is like the danger zone. That is the danger zone. Once you're in contest shape, you should be thinking, shit, I need to do as many shows as possible now and then finish. Because you will lose just fullness and tissue like that. So yes, that's my thoughts on sort of where I was at with the end of my prep. Yeah.
So just real quick, out of interest, do you increase set numbers in terms of volume at the end of your prep? Or okay, yeah.
I did towards the end trying and make up for the fact that I was getting sort of weaker on quite a few of my moves. So that was the issue. I was trying to basically catch up with the volume that I was missing through drop-offs in load. And my best look was when I just basically kept to, obviously with deloads, but kept to a volume amount that I could recover from consistently and held on to my loads as much as I possibly could and just seeked for pure retention. I think a lot of people try and chase down progress, especially like, you know, maybe towards the end you're not going to be progressing. If you try and chase down progression, if you try and increase your load or even increase sometimes your sets at that stage, you're going to roll into issues unless you've got a very good devised strategy to periodization, which involves, you know, pulling back at certain points and then ramping up again, you know, like titrating your volume and your sets. Unless you've got that in place, then, you know, adding in work just because you feel like doing it or just because you feel like your strength is dropping and you're just having an acute response is not a good plan.
Yeah, I think chasing down progression in the beginning of a prep absolutely makes sense, but at some point you just have to accept that you will probably not make any more progress.
Yes, agreed.
So coming to your again talking or continue talking about your 2017 prep, you made a pretty good post about it some time ago. I really liked that post, and you actually explained what you knew you would like to have to win, or that you want to that you need to have to win, and could you just expand on your attitude towards prioritizing condition for your 2017 prep and your general thought process at that time?
Yeah, sure. So I knew at the start, even at the start of my prep, that I wasn't going to be one of the most muscled guys on stage. I knew that I was going to be lacking that muscularity comparatively to some of the other people that I knew were competing for sure. I knew were competing. And that's the issue with the juniors, is that you are not in a weight category, so you are up against people that potentially could be far heavier and far more muscular than you. So at that point, if you're not one of those individuals that is very well muscled, potentially very well genetically endowed from a muscularity standpoint, you've got to chase the one thing that's going to win you that show, and that is standing out on stage for some reason other than the muscularity. And other than, you know, shape, symmetry, proportions, posing, you've got condition. And that's what will drive the eyes of the judges towards you as an athlete. If you are in shape and in quite shocking shape, you will be pulled into the most important call-outs. That's just the way that it works. And you will be looked at. And I knew that if I was the guy that had, you know, freaky body parts from a conditioning standpoint, I knew that I'd be looked at. Ultimately, like we were alluding to in the previous conversation, you can't chase condition solely with the goal of, you know, being just emaciated and being just condition, because condition is nothing without fullness. So if you're not full and conditioned, you won't look as conditioned as you should be. Like, you need fullness with condition. They go hand in hand. So you can't just like say, oh, you know, I don't care if I turn up flat and I'll just be peeled. You won't be peeled if you're super flat. You won't be, because your muscularity won't be fully shown, because you're not pushing that intramuscular glycogen towards the skin. You're getting that hard look. That hard, grainy, detailed look comes from being full and conditioned. So for me, I knew that I had to diet down hard and spend periods of time looking pretty bad to look really good. So I spent a lot of time looking pretty flat and pretty stringy and actually looking weirdly soft because I knew that was yielding fat loss. I knew what was creating a deficit for me. I knew that this was momentary. I knew that based on my refeed data, based on what I had planned for a peaking strategy, that I would actually continue to look better in the final week run up to the show, because I'd be increasing food, be increasing just purely carbohydrates, and I knew that always improved my look. And I knew that actually always influenced my scale weight as well. Like, it always brought every single peak that I did, I dropped weight, because I knew that I was accruing some level of stress from the deficit, and I knew that I always responded pretty poor to any sort of day where I'd dig hard, any low carb day, and I'd always wake up heavy the next day. My body just did not like being pushed in terms of giving me a scale weight response. So for people out there that, you know, see like they dig really hard, they're very hungry, and you know they wake up the next day expecting a low weigh-in. Maybe don't expect that. You know, sometimes the body just doesn't want to cooperate in that instance, and sometimes pushing too hard for too long can actually just basically cause you to spin your wheels. Ultimately, you will be making some degree of fat loss progress, and at some point the scale will respond, because that's just the way that energy balance works. But in terms of, you know, you seeing it and it being, you know, acute in that moment, it sometimes takes quite a long time, or the weeks where you do remove diet fatigue, for you to actually see the fat loss that has occurred, and for you to see the progress that you've made. So that's why I think, you know, either refeeds, like back-to-back high days, or even diet breaks are important. But yeah, like I said, I firmly chased condition. At quite a few of my shows, the guys that came like, you know, second and third were, well, at the British finals in the UK DFB, I know the guys that came second and third had at least 20 pounds on me in body weight. So coming in bursting full and big wasn't going to be a thing. You know, like, I can't be big. I just got to be big. I've got to be as full as I possibly can and as lean as I possibly can. That's what's going to win the show. And I also think that a lot of people underestimate, as a junior, the importance. I mean, even in the men's open categories, but definitely as a junior, they do not spend enough time trying to stand out on stage from a posing standpoint. Like, if you want to win,
Absolutely.
if you want to win a show, you have got to prove to the judges that you want to win. You got to stand up there and tell them that you're fucking winning and no one else is going to win. And that's what I told myself every time I was backstage. I got myself into this very focused mindset. You know, I was almost a little bit, before the prejudging part of the show, almost a bit rude, because I wouldn't talk to really many people. I'd just be in my own space. I'd have my headphones in and I'd be closing my eyes and just listening to my music. And that might seem a bit meh, but it was what I needed to do to be like focused on the task at hand. In the night show, when I came back, and obviously I could talk to people a little bit more and relax a little bit, because the main judging of the show had been done. But when I was getting like, I was like imagining I was getting ready for like some sort of fight or something. Like, I was psychologically preparing myself for, you know, getting on stage and proving that I wanted to win. And I don't think enough people take that seriously. They get caught up in the excitement of being backstage. You know, for your first show of Jan, or for anyone that's watching this doing their first show, like, take it seriously. You've spent years building muscle, and you spent months dieting down for this day. Take it damn seriously. Like, get ready for it, because it's very, very important that you do that. So yeah, standing out on stage. This revolves around hitting poses that really suit you, hitting poses that make sure that they show off every single strong point that you've got, and alluding to those strong points. You know, some of my strong points was the fact that I had very good condition, and my posterior chain was developed much more than most other people. Like, my rear lat spread and my rear double bicep were pretty good shots. So when I came to those poses, I would allude to those poses. I would hit them very hard. I'd be the first one in the pose, and I'd be the first one going out and going into the next pose. I would not be the last one hitting the pose, because when the judges look at the lineup, what do they expect to see? When they call a rear double bicep, they expect to see a rear double bicep. They don't expect to see some sort of like all this like setup process and doing all of this and doing crazy. They expect to see a rear double bicep. So hit a rear double bicep and hit it quick. But with poise. So be the first one in the pose, so people see you. They're like, okay, cool. He's the one that's first hit the rear double bicep. They're gonna first look at you. They're gonna see the condition. They're gonna start to sort of like almost veer away from some of the other competitors that are being slow to get in the pose. Judges hate people being slow into the pose. So be quick into the pose. Hit it hard, hit it with poise. Jeff Alberts talks about posing with poise a lot, something that I really took into my posing and meant that every time that I was on stage, everyone else would come out huffing and puffing after a round of posing. I'd be like, yeah, cool, let's go again. Because posing with poise allows you to pose at length. You know, you can pose forever with poise. Then it's like your transitions as well. So I knew that my condition was a priority, so I'd show off my condition in my transitions. I'd make sure that all the time when I was transitioning pose to pose, I'd have my glutes on, I'd have my glutes flexed. I'd make sure that, you know, when I hit an abs and thigh, I'd hit the standard both hands overhead, abs and thigh, and then I'd hit a transitional pose into like a crunch pose with the quad that was the most striated. I'd put that down and I'd show that to the judges. Again, it's like just like every single little thing that was adding up to putting credits in my bank account for me to win, I would do them. So yeah, that's what I think you need to think about as a competitor. It's like just playing super to your strong points, and remember that all the other juniors or the lower level like amateur competitors aren't going to be potentially taking posing as seriously as you are. And if you can take it seriously, you can have the most fluid transitions. You can look like you're a pro-level athlete with regards to your posing, your presentation. You will stand out and you will definitely get looked at. Even if you don't have the best physique on stage, you could end up winning, but just because you showed it and displayed it the best. The number one reason why a lot of people don't win shows is because they can't display their physique. And if you can't display your physique, you will go back in placings pretty significantly. So yeah, display and play to your strong points, and that's what I knew would be a huge factor in me doing very well. So yeah, that's that question covered, I think.
Absolutely. I definitely, I pretty much all, I love these points, and I will definitely hear to this again. I will definitely listen to this again. And actually, at some point, even got goosebumps, man. So that was pretty cool, man. Yeah, absolutely. I will definitely get into my next, like in my upcoming pool session, even more excited than I was even. Yeah. Yeah, I think you made some good points there, and it's that conditioning like often wins shows, size usually don't, and muscularity can if it actually comes conditioned. So yeah, I think those were definitely good points. And you also mentioned that that people usually at the later end of the prep told you that you're already ready. And I would be interested in what things did help you in terms of not letting those opinions get to you and still continuously focusing on conditioning.
Yeah, sure. So this was actually an issue from like the very beginning. So I remember like 3 weeks into prep, I lost a lot of the water weight and bloat that I lost at the start, that you always lose at the start of the diet. And I took a few photos, and the thing is with my physique is like having very minimal body fat on my back. It's why I'm quite favourable when I post up photos in my off season of my rear lat spread and rear double, is because they don't look that bad in off season, because if you pinch my back, there's not much there. There really isn't. So I look fairly lean there already, and especially when I drop water weight, my back looks like, in good lighting, it looks like very lean, because there's quite a bit of muscle there, and it looks, and obviously not much body fat, and it looks great. So I posted a shot up of that, like I think I was like 35 pounds above my stage weight, and people were like, "Whoa, are you not scared? You're coming in very, very like too fast." And at that point, I knew that I was quite far off, because the first thing that I'd recommend to anyone is taking lots of shots. So lots of shots. You take shots ideally post-workout in some more favorable lighting, because remember, show lighting is pretty good. So if you get some shots in good lighting, it's nice to have that, so you understand what you're going to look like on stage. You might actually start believing in yourself a little bit more when you see some shots in good lighting.
Interesting.
Because a lot of people take shots in horrendous lighting, thinking that if they're in condition in horrendous lighting, they'll be in condition on stage. And they start to actually really beat themselves up about the way that they look, because all their progress photos are taken in horrendous lighting. They step on stage for the first time, they win, and they're like, whoa, I didn't realize I looked like that. I'm like, yeah, because you've been taking windowsill lighting photos your whole prep. But the windowsill lighting is very important for monitoring condition, because
Absolutely.
Like a shredded arse in windowsill lighting is a very shredded arse on stage. And you like every time, oh my god, I can't, like I remember sending some photos to Alberto Nunez in the windowsill lighting of my glutes and hamstrings about 4 weeks out from my first show, and I was like, Bert, I don't think these are going to be ready enough. And he was like, be patient. It might be like 1 week, and they'll just come in really fast. And that did kind of happen, but they were still a bit too fat for my liking for the first show, and it just took a lot of time for those to get lean. And this is what I'm very aware of when I plan my 2020 prep. I know that I've got a lot of body fat to lose off those areas. So me taking photos in my off season and just analyzing my back and my good points and my strong points, it's probably a very poor idea, because I'll end up dieting and having the same issue with running into like problems with getting my glutes and hams lean. So I'd say your analysis point when people start to say, oh, you're too lean, you're not ready, you're gonna be ready too soon, whatever, is your mirror, your windowsill lighting, natural lighting photos. Those are the ones that are going to dictate a lot of where you need to be from a conditioning perspective. And I also make sure that I know, or make it clear to clients, the caliber of what you're competing against. So nowadays, since 2014, the standards of natural bodybuilding are just absurd. They're so high. If you compete, especially over here in the UK, the standards are ridiculous. And if you don't have dug out glutes and dug out hamstrings, even as a junior, you won't win. You'll be beaten by someone that has that. And like, this is where the balance of digging for conditioning versus fullness, etc., comes into play. Of course, it matters, but unfortunately, everyone does have that level of condition. So I knew in 2017 that if people told me my back was ready and my glutes weren't, I knew that I still wasn't going to win. And ultimately, it's about winning at this stage. So I had to push for what was needed, as we've already alluded to. So the other thing that I think is important when sort of dealing with people that are saying that you're going to be ready is understanding who's saying that. So a lot of the time it's like a random guy at the gym that sees you training. I had guys tell me you must be like 2 weeks out when I was like 20 weeks out, and all they'd seen is my forearms. I'm like, this is not what I'm showing on stage. Like, unfortunately, I'm not just showing my forearms on stage. My forearms stay lean all year round. I know I'm very fat when I don't get forearm vascularity. If I have no forearm vascularity, I am way above my stage weight, and I need to mini cut very fast. So I just take everything that someone says with a pinch of salt, and I made another post about this. I think you've probably seen it. I had a post about sort of having critical eyes and the importance of having critical eyes. You'll have people that tell you look great all the time and tell you look improved, and all of these things, and damn, like even now, like the it's off topic, but the off season, like when people comment on my photos, I love it. But when people comment on my photos saying like, oh, like you look so improved, you've definitely got more muscle, I'm like, how can you tell? How can you tell I've got more muscle? Because I look less muscular than when I'm in contest prep. I look way less muscular because I've got way more body fat. Like, yeah, of course you can tell where body parts have maybe got a bit more density comparative to previous off seasons, of course. And you know that at this body weight, I think the main skill in the off season is knowing that you are leaner at a body weight that you were previously fatter. If that's happening, you're probably building muscle. If you're overloading and you're progressing in the gym, you're doing movements. Combined with performance, you're probably building muscle. But you're only going to see that when you diet down. Like when I diet down and people say, "Oh wow, you've made improvements," I'm like, "Yes, I have. I can now see it." So I think that's a off tangent, but really important. So yeah, critical eyes. I think having people that have had lots of years of experience in the game to give you honesty is very important. So even if you have that, close friend that takes lots of progress photos for you, that says you always look good, that's great. It's good motivational stuff and it'll keep you happy. But ultimately, you need someone that's had lots of years of competing that tells you what's happening, what's going on. You need to ideally, Jan, you're doing a great job at this. You're seeing people like Valentin in person. In person is key. People need to see you there physically in person, because the amount of times that I've had clients send me shots and I'm like, actually, you're very close, and then I've gone and seen them in person. I'm like, shit, we need to rush. Like, this is completely different to what I'm getting in my progress shots. Even in natural lighting, some people can just like look better in photos than they do in person. And
interesting.
One of my clients, for example, really recently, we've been having quite a heavy focus on his back, because I believed that it was very weak. And I went to see him in person the other day, and I felt his back, and there was just basically, it felt like he was storing every ounce of body fat in his back. So it was, if anything, just covering the muscularity that he had there. So I know that when we start to peel off the layers and diet down, he will probably have a back there, because when he hits a shot like a rear lat spread, it looks okay. It looks like it's got good width, fairly decent density. When you feel the back, it feels like there's muscle there, and it feels like there's density there, but there's also just this huge layer of body fat. So it's just covering up all the muscularity. It's making it look far smaller than it actually is. So that's why seeing him in person was like, okay, we could probably afford to actually put less of a priority on your back now and make your program more evenly split, because other than that, it's very balanced. My girlfriend Danny, she also sees a lot of her clients in person for bikini, and she had a client very recently that was looking almost ready in her progress photos. Went to see her, and she's not quite as ready as she looks in her progression photos. And her progression photos were taken in fairly natural lighting. And again, like you don't, and this is not calling out any clients, but you don't know what the client is sometimes doing with the photos, or the angle, or the lighting, or fuck me, even a filter. Like, you can usually tell whether there's a filter on these things, but you'd start to question why the hell they were putting one on there. Like, some clients do get scared to send progress shots because they get worried that they're going to get told they're behind or something, but that's what they need to hear. Yeah, I think number one is get people seeing you in person, that understand the sport, that understand the caliber of what we need, and if anything, in my prep, I know that my head's going to be a bit skewed at some point during that diet, so I'll just get people looking at me in person if possible. I don't think I don't know whether I'll get a coach or not. I probably won't, because I like doing it myself. I like knowing that if I screw it up, and I don't like blaming people. I've never really enjoyed that. I don't like having an opportunity to blame. I'd rather just blame myself. So I'd still get people looking at my photos or looking at me in person and giving their critical eyes. So yeah, that's that.
Yeah, definitely also thought about that, but ultimately I think it's probably not a bad idea to get a coach, especially in your first prep. I definitely can relate to seeing clients in person. I just met like 6 clients in Vienna like 2 months ago or something, and I had the same meeting with like 4 clients or something 2 months before, again in Vienna, and seeing clients in person is first and foremost always super awesome, especially if you actually coach them for a longer time frame and you do the video check-ins as you do, or me, and you meet them in person and it's still like you already know them. Which is pretty cool. And I was also impressed by some improvements they made that I didn't see in the progress pictures as much. I saw that, but I definitely in person it was like much more severe. And I have one client which I coach for a pretty long time now. Pretty much close to 2 years. And I will prep him next year, and it's always super good to see him in person and actually I probably met him like 8 times or something, and he's living in Vienna as well. So definitely have an eye on him. AJ, I know you're time restricted, so we may cut it short here, or just get like one of the questions that I made up instead of the.
Yeah, I have time for one more, Jan.
What do you think is a better idea to discussing what you how to get buy-in from your clients in terms of what they need to have for the stage, or the balancing thing with prep and how that changes over time? I think that the later one is probably a better fit in for the end.
Yes, yeah, we'll do the later one. Yeah, I think we kind of. I think I'll allude to more similar points in the buy-in because I've kind of discussed similar stuff. So yeah, let's do the last one.
Cool. So I really like the recent approach with balancing life and bodybuilding that you're putting out on Instagram lately, and I would be interested in how does this change in contest prep, and by how much relative to this stage of prep you're in.
Sure. So yeah, I mean, I've definitely over the last 6 months, since having a pretty serious relationship and things like that, approached life in a slightly different way to what I've used to. I think definitely in 2017, my life was at its peak in terms of bodybuilding focus. I was very self-absorbed in the goal, and I think that can do you some favors because I wouldn't miss a beat, to be honest, and it was very focused on what I needed to do. And I've already alluded to, obviously, from a work perspective, I know that things are going to change in 2020. I know that they will have to. And it's the same with, my relationship. Ultimately, still going to have a degree of balance, but there is going to be less of it because it's a very serious goal. And, luckily enough, my girlfriend will be competing too. So it will not change much for us because we'll just both be in the very similar scenario. But I think for people that don't have that, you need to be aware and very much, communicative with your partner and saying that things are potentially going to change in the sense that, you're not going to be able to go for meals out and as frequently as you normally would. You're not going to be able to go to as many social events. You're not going to be able to partake in a lot of these things that offer a degree of like a social life and balance to your life, and that is something that does change for most people, and unfortunately it's just something that's part of prep. And if you really enjoy prep and you're doing it for the right reasons, you'll be kind of okay with these things that have to change. And I think most people will understand if you've got good friends and a good friendship circle and good relationships. People will understand and they'll take on board the perspective that you have to be a little bit selfish. I think some people take it a little bit too far, and they say, I can't do anything. If we make it through this prep, this will be the best thing ever, and like make it through. And I'm like, shut up! Like, come on, just like. It's difficult, but I don't think putting pressure on the relationship, saying things like, if we make it through, is good, because that already puts a very big weight on yourself to try and view it as a task instead of viewing it as something that's just a change. It's just a slight change, For me, especially, so with work at the moment, funnily enough, Cliff put up a post literally yesterday, I think, on client roster and numbers, and he said that he works with anywhere between, I think, 65 and 85 or something like that clients.
Insane.
Very insane. Yeah, very insane. But not as insane as I've heard, Jan. So I know UK coaches that work with 120 and above. And I'm being serious, dude. Yes. My exact reaction. Crazy, right? I don't know how that's possible. But it makes me think like, can I do that? Like, could I try doing that? And me and Valentin have had plenty of discussions on coaching and just taking client rosters to as high as we possibly can and just seeing whether we survive or not. And I think anything above 50 and above is pretty difficult. When we're doing what we do, Jan, it's pretty difficult to do video communication, email or WhatsApp support. One day for me, I could be inundated with questions, and if I'm trying to keep on top of several check-ins in and around that, it's just a nightmare. Like, if someone sends me form clips of like their, like, for example, like one whole session, I'm like there for like an hour or an hour and a half reviewing form clips. I'm like, this is my day just gone. So I know that at my current level of work, which is, all honesty, I work with anywhere between 50 and 55 clients at the moment. That's where my roster's been for about the last 7 to 8 months. It was a lot. It was actually quite significantly lower over the Christmas period because I had a lot of people end prep, and because I work with a lot of juniors that just have to invest in the cost of coaching for a prep, and they can't really afford it too much in their off season, which is a shame because they actually do need it. A lot of them.
Yeah, absolutely.
But a lot of them do tend to drop off. So I actually had lower numbers over Christmas, which made me realize, I was like, oh, okay, this is what actually having, a day is like. So that's where I work at the moment, and I find that I have some days where I'm like, okay, this could be feasible in a prep. Like, for example, a day like today is a rest day, and I've got the time to do a podcast. I've got the time to do another solo podcast. I've just done one of mine.
Yeah, I just saw that. Crazy.
I've got that time, and I've got the time to see a chiro. So I'm like, yeah, I could do this in a prep pretty fine. But there's other days where I'm like, okay, I wouldn't have hit my step total today. No chance. I wouldn't have hit like 10,000 steps if that was my goal. It just wouldn't have happened unless I wanted to sacrifice something. So it would sacrifice my sleep. Simple. People say get up earlier, do more, and I'll be like, yeah, okay, but I won't get my sleep. Valentin made a fantastic post a month or so ago about saying yes to one thing and saying no to others. Amazing post, probably one of his best ever. I really like that one, and I've used that example so many times with clients when they say to me, I'm busy with this and busy with that. I'm like, well, yeah, you're saying yes to one thing, you're saying no to doing this. And I think that's what I need to realize when I enter my prep, is that I want to say yes to trying to win more shows. So I've got to kind of say no to coaching anywhere above 35 clients, really. I think I'll keep my roster at 30 and coach 30 clients for a slightly higher rate, and that will be it. How I'll go about bringing my number from where it is now down to that, I'll just use probably that Christmas period again. I'll use that Christmas period of some level of drop-off, and I won't take on board anymore, and I'll just roll into 2020 like that. Luckily, by that point, I should have built up my business even more, so the the want and the need for people to pay a higher amount for me as a coach would probably be there by that point. Another year of coaching in the books, so I can afford to charge a slightly higher rate. And with that, I think I'll be like, okay, I'm charging this higher rate. This is what more you are getting. So I'd expand something of my business to give more, whether it's just something additional. So I don't know, improved something. I'd improve something for the value. And I think that's really important when you're raising prices, but again, completely off topic. And that's what I would do for 2020, and it would allow me to focus on the more gradual, like sort of like nice income that comes from the member site. Hopefully that will be built up even more as well. Have nice income from the 30 clients and be very comfortable with that, and have far less work stress, because whilst our job isn't inherently that super stressful because we like it, and I think a lot of the time when we have a stressful day, comparatively to someone else's stressful day, it's probably a little bit less because we still love what we do. Whereas other people they go into the office and from 9 o'clock in the morning to 5 at night, they hate it. And I've done that. I've done a job where I literally don't want to go. And, I think when you realize that, we're so lucky to do what we do and we just wake up and love it, you realize that it's quite advantageous to just continue at a roster that makes sense and not start to basically put yourself in a burden with the work and start to dread work, because I could see that happening. I could see me starting to dread the amount of stuff that I've got to do. If I have a checklist of steps, cardio training, and a prep and a calorie deficit and a lot of clients, something's going to go wrong. And for me, my stubbornness with my business will probably result in me not doing a good prep. I'll probably be able to retain the business element of things, but the prep would probably go down the drain because I'd be too stubborn and I'd be up late at night doing check-ins and shit like that, which I'm not meant to be doing. And I did the majority of my 2017 prep at around about 30 to 35 clients. I don't know if you were following me at that point, but I did actually start to create a waiting list about midway through my prep because I got a lot of demand, and I literally did not respond to any of those applications, and none of them. And I had a long waiting list there. I don't do waiting lists anymore because I just say I can't take on board clients. Try again. If you want me at a later date, try again. Because waiting lists, man, they just, in my opinion, they get. I think it's silly. I think there's loads of coaches out there that are great, and I'd rather that person go and maybe try and find another suitable coach than have to wait for myself. And ultimately, if they really want myself, they can try again in the future. And a lot of people actually did do that, and then I took them all on board later. But yeah, I think that's the balancing act that I will have. Combined with that, things like travel. Traveling when you're prepping is very hard, and it's something that me and Danny both love doing, but it's something that will definitely be at a reduced frequency in 2020, just because traveling and trying to stay on track with your routine and your food and your water and your training sessions is hard. And I'd want to just be in, this kind of sounds a bit boring, but I want to be in like robot mode. I'd want to just be in the same gym, the same routine, the same schedule, and just do it and love it. And a weekend away or a couple of weekends away could quite easily throw me off. And I don't want that. I'd rather just do that when I won my shows. Rather just do that at the end.
Yeah, that's interesting because I thought, still think that I will probably travel quite a lot to Vienna to actually continue to meet up clients and actually train there. So I will be in Vienna from tomorrow till Tuesday, and obviously I'm just 8 weeks into prep, so it doesn't really affect me that much. I mean, I have I will still continue my my kind of schedule and like my habits there, and but we will see how that plays out like 3 months out or something like that. So yeah, just real quick, what's your opinion on eating out in prep? I'm just curious.
I personally am a no-goer on eating out in prep. The reason being is that I'm of the mindset of like, when I step on stage and I'm like, have I done everything within my power to be the best I could possibly be on this day? If I get beaten and I start to reverse engineer as to what I did in my prep, and I think, I ate out here, and I ate out quite frequently, I think that some of that would have caused an issue with me being beaten, because if I come second and I get beaten by someone better and I did everything I could, I will walk away from that venue on that day feeling okay about it. I'll still be a bit pissed off because I don't like coming second, but I will ultimately feel relatively okay about it because I know that I've done all that I could. But see, I also think that enjoying it, I'd struggle to enjoy it because I know that this is something that potentially isn't fully trackable or as trackable as one of my meals. When I go into prep, I'm literally like single ingredient foods, like tracking single ingredient foods pretty much only, really limited on packaged items because I know the variance on packaged items. I mean, ultimately, Jam, we're creating an energy deficit here. If you're in an energy deficit at the end of the day, you're going to lose fat and you're going to be consistent with that. I think later into prep, when hunger is high, satiety is of absolute pivotal importance, eating out is probably just a no-go in general because the satiety aspect is low. You're going to want just big salads and stuff like that. You're not going to go to a restaurant and say, hey, can you fill a Pyrex jug up with lettuce, please? There's not an option for that at a restaurant. You're going to have to eat something more calorically dense. Now, attending social events when you're dieting, I think you can. I think you can still go. You could just say to your friends, like, look, I'm sorry, I can't eat here. I have brought my Tupperware if you want to eat and can join in on the food. If you feel awkward doing that, just order a Diet Coke and just drink Coke and say that in 6 months' time I'll be able to eat with you. And, ultimately the restaurant will always be there, hopefully, and the friends should be there too if they support your goals. So, yeah, I know that it's possible, and I know you can eat out and prep, and I know you can still step on stage and do well, but I wouldn't. That's what I'd say, okay? That's
Cool.
fine.
Yeah, good point to keep it off. I just will give you the opportunity to just plug your stuff really quick, and then we'll end it here.
Yeah, so sure. I'm most active on Instagram at AJ_Morris_. So that's where I do, I post every day pretty much. And I have the story function basically full of, unfortunately at the moment, it's lots of reshares, which you're going to come into even more and more and more as the podcast grows. It's just going to be reshares. But I try and keep some content on there. But I love the reshare function. I think it's just great. I think it offers such a great degree of leverage. So I have that, and then I have something I'm pouring a lot of effort into at the moment is my member site. So that's www.madebymorriscoaching.com. That consists of a forum, which a lot of people are just logging their progress. So if you like the old school approach where you see people's training and people's diets on a forum, you'll love the site, because what I like about it is it takes me back to when I had very few Instagram followers, and I'd give very big, long answers to every single question I got. It takes me back to that because I give that level of attention to people in the forum. Ultimately, with Instagram DMs, now, if I open my Instagram after this podcast, I guarantee I'll have about 15 DMs. Now, am I going to be able to respond to every single one of them with the level of detail I want? Probably not, because it's just a time issue. So I give a lot of time to people in the forums, and we have a lot of cool people logging. We have a lot of cool things coming up. I'm basically trying to turn it into a site very similar to what Jordan does with Trained by JP, in the sense that I want natural athletes on there. I want to send videographers around the UK and get training content of the best natural bodybuilders in the UK and get that on the site. And so I'm pouring a lot of time and money into it this year to make it basically what I want it to be, which is like a bit of a natural hub, so to speak. Is it the most crazy informative site in the world? Probably not. It will get there because there's going to be more informative stuff coming from different people as we go. Is it as informative as something like RP Plus or something like that? No, it's not. It's not on that level. It's not that kind of site. I just want to make that clear. But what it is it's something that you can sit down before you go and train. You can watch one of the workout videos, and you can get a lot of motivation from that. And I think a lot of people don't take into account how much of an importance external motivation is. So that's what the site's for. But yeah, we do have one workout video and one informative video a week go up on there. So this week's content was a pull session, and I also did a informative video all on refeeds.
Cool.
So there's stuff like that. That's what you can expect. And then I have the podcast, which is just very easy to find. Just search AJ Morris on YouTube. However, I still get at least a couple of DMs a week saying, "How do I find your podcast?" I'm just like, come on, guys! It's just my name. Search my name and podcast. Come on, find it. But yeah, it surprises me how some people just don't know the search function.
How do you make your oats, AJ?
Yes, I know, and that's a very other regular question that I got for years and years and years, to the point where now I just don't put them on my story, Chan. Instead, I put bowls of fruit on my story, and then I get asked how I make a bowl of fruit, which is just same issue. I'm sure you get asked how you make your magnums.
Yeah, sometimes.
Yeah, of course. Cool though. No, I really appreciate you having me on, mate. I hope this goes down well with everyone, and if people want to listen to more of what I say, then follow the podcast, follow me on Instagram, and appreciate anyone that listened to this.
I will put everything in the description.
Cool. All right.
So, thank you again for coming on, and maybe see you again.
Sweet. Yeah, absolutely. Cheers, guys.
Bye.